This is a special presentation brought to you by the Daf Map, based on one of the lectures given by HaRav Yehonasan Berger Shlita. Please check out our other videos and shiurim at www.thedafmap.com.
Today's shiur begins 10 lines from the top of Daf Nun. The Gemara opens with a quote from the Mishnah, the list of various forms of tumas meis that cause a Nazir to lose the days that he has counted toward his Nazirus completion. And it said, Al Kezayas Meis, Val Kezayas Netzel. We're at this point going to focus on the issue of the Netzel. The Gemara continues with a Tanaic source asking what is Netzel. And on the side of the Gemara, we have a Nosei Mivneh heading. You'll notice shortly triangles appearing in the Gemara text. These are Shlavim, Levarer. We're reading from the side of the Gemara. These are stages to clarify. Mahu ha-tnoyim shenetzel mitama. What are the conditions that would allow or cause netzel to be a source of defilement? So the Gemara mentions ve'ezuhu netzel, basar hameis shekorash umoyol shehirsiach. Basar hameis shekorash would be flesh from a corpse that coagulated or congealed. Rashi says shenimoach v'achakach korash. It melted and then coagulated. And moyol shehirsiach, Rashi says, umoyol shehirsiach sheyotza mibsar hameis kemin mayim. There is some type of emission or exusion from a corpse, some liquid substance. V'hirsiach, it was boiled up. V'korash al yedei resichus shirsiach. As a result of its being boiled up, it then coagulated. The cholhani netzel kebesar hameis domi v'nozir megaleh cholav. These situations of the melted flesh that coagulated, or this liquid that was boiled and korash coagulated, are sources of tumas meis, causing a Nazir to take the haircut, representing the end of the tumah period. Heichi domi. So now the Gemara looks into what are the circumstances. I lema delo yadinon de didehu ki korash mai have. In order to appreciate this, so we glance at the Rush. The Rush commentary, you'll find the lower part of the page, on the first of the wide lines, we've added a little star to help you find it. Heichi domi besar hameis. What's the case here of corpse flesh? I delo yadinon sheba mibsar hameis. If the substance is not known, we don't know that it came from flesh of a corpse, he korash mayavi, so what? It coagulates. Just because you have some material that had melted and coagulated, why should the Nazir have to take the haircut? Why should he lose his days? Shemo mikicho v'niohu. It might be a result of phlegm and mucus. These are substances that even if they come from a corpse, they're not responsible for tumah. So the Gemara continues. We go to now triangle number 2. Elo diadinon dididehu. We have some corpse flesh material, and I know that it comes from a corpse. Well then, afal gav delo korash. Even if it didn't coagulate, it would still be metame boyo, because you have substance that represents an olive quantity of corpse flesh. So what is the Mishnah describing when it's, with this Tanaic source I should say, when it says Ezu netzel basar hameis shekorash? Number 3, Omar Reb Yirmiyah, bestam, meaning I know that the substance comes from a corpse. I korash moyolhu. If it coagulates, then it's, in effect, it's moyal. It's that liquid exusion that's we'll say flesh, of a flesh origin. Lo korash, if it doesn't coagulate, then dilmo kiche v'niyahu, it might be then the mucus or phlegm from a corpse, and that is not metamabel. So the knowledge of the certainty is it comes from a corpse. The korash factor, the coagulation factor, is needed in order to establish that it's flesh-based and not phlegm or mucus. Bo mine Abaye meirabo. And here we start a new topic coming off of the issue of netzel, but it's not a question concerning a Nazir. On the side of the Gemara, we have our topic heading, no say. Ha'im yesh netzel lebehema sheyatamet tumas nevela. Tumas nevela has nothing to do with the topic of a Nazir. A Nazir is allowed to expose himself to different forms of tumah. The exception being the realm of tumas meis, death defilement. But here we're talking about an animal corpse. An animal corpse is mitama nevela. What does that mean? That if an animal dropped dead, it is opposed to being slaughtered properly, it is mitama, it communicates defilement. If you touch it or you carry it, certainly not if you're under the same overhang or overshadow it. That is not tumah. That does not generate tumah when you're dealing with tumas nevela. The reason we're discussing this here is simply because we're coming on the heels of a netzel discussion. Bo'amine Abaye meiraba. So Abaye presents this question: Yesh netzel lebehema o ein netzel lebehema? Is there netzel? This whole description of some, we'll say, melted substance from an animal corpse that then coagulated, does that generate tumas nevela through maga, contact, or masa, or carrying? Or maybe there is no netzel with regard to tumas nevela. Mi amrinon ki gemiri netzel. Do we say that when we have this tradition, Gemiri is a reference to an oral tradition, these halachas are governed by an oral tradition coming from Mount Sinai. If you open up a Torah and you look in Psukim to see where these are mentioned, you're not going to find them mentioned explicitly. The Psukim deal with a Nazir being exposed to Tumas Meis, but what constitutes Tumas Meis vis-a-vis the Nazir, that's all based on an oral tradition, the details. So, do we say that the tradition concerning netzel as a source of tumah, that's da'asi mi'odam, only if it comes from a human corpse? Aval da'asi mi'behema lo, but if it comes from an animal corpse, not so. Oy dilma lo shna, or maybe no distinction is made. So the question is raised. The Gemara at this point says that the purpose of raising this question is actually limited to one of two opinions that deal with something called the limits of tumah chamura. There are two categories of tumah for our purposes. There's tumah chamura and tumah kala. Heavy or powerful tumah, strong defilement, and kala, weak, light defilement. The concept of tumah kala is manifest in the realm of tumas oichlin. When you're dealing with food tumah that affects food does not affect people. What we're interested in is tumah, the realm of tumah chamura. What kind of things, what is capable of defiling a person? So the Gemara says, Hanicha means things are fine, meaning the question doesn't have to be raised. This issue of is there netzel behema or not need not be raised. Lemanda Omar tuma chamura ad leger. The next phrase is in brackets because it's not the focus of our discussion, but it says v'tuma kala ad lekelev shapir. There is an opinion that says that tuma chamura, tuma that affects a person, will be so, even if you're dealing with things that are, we'll say, rotting or decomposing, but provided that its state is something that a ger would eat. Now, a ger is a reference in this case to a Gentile, a ger toshav, a ger who is not commanded regarding laws of kashrus. Would a person eat it? You can, without sticking to the literal translation, the issue is simply, if it's, let's say, animal decomposition, that's it's going bad, we'll say, as we say in common parlance, it's going bad, but people would still eat it. So if you say that tumah chamura, the kind of tumah that can defile a person, is only that which, when you're dealing with tumas nevela, meat-based tumah, animal corpse-based tumah, is only if it's in a state where people would still eat it, then our discussion is irrelevant. Why? Because netzel is so decomposed that no person would eat it. A dog might eat it, but a person wouldn't eat it. And since a person wouldn't eat it, it cannot affect a person. So we're working with this, we'll say, objective state that netzel has is something humans would not eat. Well, if people wouldn't eat it, so there's no tumas nevela to discuss. Tumas nevela is a kind of tumah that's called tumah chamura, that it's a type of tumah that would affect people, would defile a Jew. But netzel, being that it's not roy lager, it's not something a person would eat, so there's no discussion. It wouldn't affect the person. We continue in the Gemara. Elo laman de'omar tumah chamura ad lekelev, ma ikol meimar. But according to the opinion that says that people can become defiled if they come into contact with nevela, with animal corpse material, as long as a dog would still eat it. So now, netzel, as we said before, is coming from a decomposing animal corpse. That netzel is something a dog would eat. Our question, though, is there netzel when it comes to a behemoth? We know there's netzel that comes from human corpses. But what about a decomposing animal? Does the tradition concerning netzel, which, as we saw before, as defined flesh that had melted and then recoagulated, does that present a nevela problem, tumas nevela problem, being that, as we said, we're dealing with an animal source, not a human source? So now we continue in the Gemara. Toshma, here we have a Tanaic source that deals with chelev of a nevela. Himchuhu be'ur tomei bechamo tohor. If the chelev is fats that come from a creature, not a person. Some Meforshim say that the source it deals with a nevelas of tohor, but I don't think that it's important right now to focus on that. The Rashi says, Toshma chelev nevela, shimchu ba'ur, shetichu ba'ur. We're dealing with chelev. It's fatty sections of an animal corpse, or a bird corpse, that was melted in fire. That's himchu, it's melted down, ba'ur, in the fire. Tomei, that is capable of communicating tumah. Bechamo, if it was melted down in the sun, simply in the heat of the sun, tohor, it would not communicate tumah. Ve'i salka daitoch yesh netzel ad lekelev. If you think, we added, by the way, yesh netzel based on the girsa of the Birkas Rosh, one of the commentators on our Masechta. If you hold that there is netzel, and the netzel represents a problem as long as a dog would eat it, well, afilu b'chamo nami, even if it was melted down in the sun, it should be a source of tumah. So the fact that it says in this source b'chama tohor would seem to indicate that the concept of netzel doesn't apply to nevela. The Gemara rejects this. Emas memachile. At what point does the chalev melt down when you're leaving it in the sun? The sun, it's 93 million miles away from the earth, and it could be quite hot, but it's not the same type of heat intensity as something cooking over a fire, of course, on earth. So when you're dealing with something melting down in the sun, at what point does it melt down? Basar de asruach b'chama. After it's become rotted in the sun, it first reaches a state where it's rotted. It's something that's, we'll just say it's disgusting. Even a dog wouldn't eat from it. Kevan de asrach, since it has become so rotted and disgusting, have lay ofar. It's like mere dirt from the ground, which is no source of tumah. So that, all told, there could very well be netzel from behema, from a nevela, and the source that says b'chama tohor is not a refutation of that concept. All that it tells us is that when it's himchu b'chama, it first reaches a point of rottenness, of disgust, that even a dog wouldn't eat from it. And we mentioned before that Tumah Chamura, according to this opinion, is based on we'll call the dog-eating standard. Here, it hasn't met that minimum level which would cause Tumah. Why? Because it's rotted before it coagulates. Let us take a look at the Rashi. In the middle of the wide section of the Rashis, you see a double star, making it easier to find. I would tell you that there is netzel for behema. By the way, that girsa we don't see in our Gemara text, but Rashi seems to have that there is netzel behema. And in this particular case, why is it that if it's melted down in the sun, does it represent something Torah does not communicate tumah? At what point does it finally melt down in the sun? Only when it's rotted. When it reaches that point, even a dog wouldn't eat from it. And therefore it is tohor. It won't communicate tumah even to other food items. That shows you how extreme this is in its resemblance to dirt and not to nevela. We turn back to the Gemara when we have a new discussion. On the side of the Gemara, we have the topic as nitzuk. Nitzuk has to do with a flow, where you're pouring some food substance. If you have, let us say, some food that's defiled, that's tomei, or a vessel that's tomei, and into the tumah you are pouring from an upper vessel some food substance, and there is naturally a stream that develops while you're pouring, while coming from top down. There's a stream, and the stream would represent a form of contact between that which is below and tomei, and that which is above, that is tohor. Does the nitzuk, the flow, cause the tumah from the lower receptacle to be considered connected, and hence rise and metama that which is above? So in one word, that is referred to as nitzuk. Tanan, kol hanitzuk tohor, chutz midvash hazifim v'hatzapichis. all cases of flows do not communicate from the tumah that is below upwards to the foodstuff that is, as we say, above. With the exception of honey, that is called dvash hazifim vatzapiches. What exactly these are? So we can look together at the Tosfos commentary, starting 5 lines from the bottom. Tanan Hosim, the Perek Chamishi de Machshirin, in the 5th parak of that Masechta called Machshirin, which is part of Seder Taharos. Kol hanitzok tahor, shim yotzak v'iro mashkin tahurim l'soich mashkim tameim, milamala lamata. If a person is pouring some liquids from above downwards into a receptacle that has mashkim, liquids that are defiled, lo nitmu ha-tahurim, the tahurim, the tahor liquid above, does not become tamei. The nitzuk eno chibur, a flow does not constitute a connection. Lo l'tuma v'lo l'tara, not for defilement purposes, nor for purification purposes when that becomes an issue. The Tosfos continues, Chutz min dvash hazifim, Perek Basra de Soita, in the last parak of Maseches Sota, Meforish Rabbi Yochanan Mai Zifim. What is that? Dvash shemezayfen oisoi. It's honey that lends itself to mizayef, is, we'll say, literally is counterfeiting. It has to do with fake. You'll see it's diluted honey, but as far as the public is concerned, it's still viewed in their minds as pure honey. So that if you are a honey producer and you have this quality of honey that's very thick, so the Tosfos goes on to say, the fishu of yoiser midai, it's very thick. Umisimo mayim v'eno nicker. People are able to add water to it, and it's not noticeable as having been diluted. Rav Shimon Lakish Omer al Shem Mekomo. So Rabbi Yochanan says that it's based on this ability to add water and get away with it. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says that Dvash HaZifim is called Zifim because of its place. It's a name of a place. Shenemar, the Pasuk makes reference to places Zif, V'telem, Ubalos, Tzapichis. Now, what is Tzapichis? Kamo, it's like the term you find in the Torah, Ketzapichis B'dvash, which is found in the Torah in the context of the mon, that food that fell from heaven to the Jews during their sojourn in the wilderness. Klomar, Sheroidosim Nakaveres Mu'urov Im HaShaiva, it's Tzapichis B'dvash is honey removed from the honeycomb where the bees produce their honey, and it's mixed with bee or honey wax, bees wax. Ubarach pigurish isa shemetugenes b'dvash be'elu nitzuk tamei demitoch shu av harbe choshev oichel. It's some type of dough that's fried in honey, and it's very thick, and it's considered like a food substance. Since it's very thick, so it's considered as if the lower is attached to the upper. Let's continue in our Gemara. Having read the Reisha of the source, that in general flows of liquids do not constitute a connection, with the exception of Dvash Hazif and Vatzapiches, we continue to the top of Omid Beis. Beis Shammai Oimrim, Af HaMikbeh Shel Grisim V'Shel Pul Mipnei Shehi Soledes Lacharel. Beis Shammai adds that there is a connection, there is nitzuk when pouring Mikbeh Shel Grisim. This is a porridge made of grisin or pul, different types of grain-like substances, leguminous substances that from which people will make porridge, a thick cereal type substance. And Beis Shammai says that the emphasis is not on the thickness aspect, but more on the fact that when you straighten out the vessel, the upper vessel from which you're pouring the porridge, soledes lachorea, the term means it springs back. it has this, we'll say, springy quality to it. That when I'm sure everyone has experienced this at one point or another with different types of substances, that when you're pouring them and you re-straighten the vessel, you'll notice that at the end, when you're re-straightening it, the substance that was being poured out tends to spring back. That's soledes lachorel. The Gemara raises a question, Rami Bar Chama specifically, and it's featured on the side under the Nosei Hayim Yesh Nitzuk Ba'oichlin. Now, this question is raised not within Beis Shammai, it's raised within the Tanakama, the Reisha, the first opinion. The first opinion mentioned that Dvash Hazifim and Sapichis represents a case where the Nitzuk, we'll say exceptional case where Nitzuk does represent a chibur. Chibur means a connection. And as we said, if the lower substance into which this is being poured is tamei, the upper vessel and its content, the contents of the upper vessel will become defiled. Dvash Hazifim and Sapichis, what exactly is their nature? It's true when we were reading the commentaries we mentioned they're very thick and what have you, but here we have to really become precise. There are two aspects, two possibilities of why there is nitzuk in the case of Dvash, Zif, and Sapichis, and then the issue is, can we extend this to other foods? The Tosfos, let's read it together simply by way of, we'll say, introduction to the Gemara. Oftentimes the Gemara presents its case in a rather terse fashion. We'll appreciate it more by having the introduction of the Tosfos. So on the second narrow line, Yesh nitzuk l'oichlin, this is the question that Rami Bar Chama will be raising. Kagon himcha shumon v'iruhu l'soich oichlin tameim. Person, imagine he melted down some fats and poured the fats into some food that was tomei, that's defiled. U'lerabbonon komibayalei, and the question is focused on the rabbonon. That means the first opinion that we saw at the bottom of Omer Aleph before we got to Beis Shammai. Mi amrinon inun mishum di'is behu riri. Is it that they, pirush dvash hazifat sapiches amru chachomim davu chibur mishum di'is behu riri, is the aspect of the dvash, that honey hazifim, and the tzapiches, that the chachomim were willing to acknowledge that there is chibur because they have riri. Klomar shehein soldin lachorehem, they spring back. V'afagav de pligi amikvishal grisen dislu riri, even though they argue with Beis Shammai regarding the porridge. Lo choshev l'tanakama, the porridge connection is not of significance to the first opinion. Ubeis Shammai savre afagav de les lukulei hayriri chashivi lechaber elyon letachton. It's a question of there is a springing back element, but it's not an intense type of spring back, and therefore the Tanakama does not regard the porridge as a connection, where Beis Shammai does. Ushar oichlin les behu riri. Other foods don't have that riri, that spring back aspect. And therefore there isn't any nitzuk connection to discuss. So that if the dvash hazifim and sapichas that the Tanakama says that their flow represents a connection is because of riri, because of the springback aspect, then only by dvash hazifim and sapichas will we say there is a connection and not other foodstuffs. Oy dilma taimo de Tanakama mishum desmichin. Maybe the reason Tanakama says by the dvash hazifim and the tzapiches that the nitzuk is a chibur is because of their thickness. Mishum shem ervim, they're very thick. Ushar oichlin nami smichin. You can find thickness by other kinds of food substances that can be poured. So all of this is a question according to the Rabbanan. Avol Beis Shammai lo kamabayale demidkomar mitnei shein soldum lacharem im kein tamayo mishum riri. As far as Beis Shammai is concerned, it's very clear that the consideration is the springback aspect, not the thickness. So Beis Shammai spelled out their reason for the chibur, for the connection. The Tanna Kama did not spell out their reason for the connection, and hence there is room for this question. Now we turn to the Gemara, which will say in a very short form that which we just saw in the Tosfos. Boy Rami Bar Chama, Yesh nitzuk l'oichlin o ein nitzuk l'oichlin. Is there a pouring connection in other cases of food, or we say no, there is no connection between the tuma below and that which is above? Mi amrinon mishum deis behu riri vahani les behu riri. Is it so that the Tanna Kama, the first opinion, acknowledged connection in the case of zifim and dvash zifim and tzadlichas because of their springback characteristic, and other foods, when being poured, don't have that intense springback characteristic? O dilma, and if we say they don't have it, so there will be no connection of nitzuk chibur with regard to other foods. O dilma mishum desmichin hu, or is it that the dvash zifim and tzadlichas are very thick? The hacha hasmichin, other foods can in fact have that thickness quality to them, and therefore if the lower receptacle has tuma in it, it will affect that which is above. Omar Rava Ta Shma. You'll notice we have a new marking that appears, a triangle that appears in alternating directions. On the side, under our Mivneh heading, the term Ta Shma appears in a triangle with the point facing upwards. Nisyonis Lifshot Hashem. These are attempts to answer the question, and the inverted triangle, Dechios, represents rejections of whatever attempt was made. So, is there connection? Is there nitzuk, that is a chibur, with regard to other oichlin? Omar Rava Ta Shma Chelev Hameis Shu Shalem Veticho Tomei. Chelev from a mace, fats from a corpse, that is shalem. Shalem means a complete olive quantity. A complete olive quantity of fats from a corpse, veticho, melted down, tomei, represents a source of tuma. Hoya mefurad vehiticho tor. If it was separated, mefurad means separated into small pieces. In other words, it might altogether equal a kazayas, but it was mefurad, and you melted it down, tohor. Let's take a look at the Rashi across from here. Tashma chelev shel meis shehu shalem. There's other girsa readings in this Rashi. You find in the Bach that particular reading, chelev shel meis shehu shalem v'tichoi tomei. Yesh bo kazayas shalem v'ticho b'machvas. There is a complete olive quantity, a full olive quantity of this chelev from the corpse, and it was melted down in a pan. Afal pishin is galgel b'machvas lo nase mufurad v'tomei. Even though it melted down, but it remains together. Again, this is something that if you've seen it, then that's great. If not, you'll have to simply imagine that you had something that was type of solid. It was melted down, but it didn't become separated into different droplets in the pan, but remained together. However, Rashi continues, Hoya mefurad, oisoi kazayas min hameis. The kazayas quantity was put in a pan, but it was fragmented. Viticho, and then you melted down the fragments. Afal pishin is chaber biyachad tor. Even if the fragments, when melted down, connect with one another, there is still no tuma. Kevon dahavile mefurad meikora, since initially it was separated into small fragments. Porcha minei tuma, the tuma literally flew away, meaning there was no tuma. Even though it joined together as a result of human intervention, melting it down and maneuvering the pan, causing the pieces to come together, that is not considered togetherness. It's not considered connecting. So we have seen then this source dealing with Chelef HaMeis. If it started out as a Kezayas and remained together so that it will generate Tumas Meis, death defilement, and if it was fragmented and then melted down, it does not generate Tumas Meis. We continue now. If you say that a flow does not constitute a connection, well, you're dealing here with liquids. The chalev was melted down, so sholem v'tichonami litar, even if it started out as a solid olive quantity of corpse fat, but it got melted down, so its connection is in a we'll say the liquid connection, similar to the issue of nitzuk. So if you say ein nitzuk lo'ichlin, so then even in this case of sholem v'ticho, it should remain tar. It should be considered disconnected at the point that it's liquidy. The Gemara rejects this and says, Omar Rabbi Zera, Ano Umar Brei Ravina Targimna. I and more Berei Ravina explained as follows: that in general, I could tell you that nitzuk is not a chibur, that a liquid connection is in fact not considered a connection. But Targimno means we explained this source of Chelev Meishu Sholem V'tichot Tomei Hocha B'Mayaskinon Kegon. Here, Hocha B'Mayaskinon, in this particular source, what are we discussing? Kegon de Bahadi the Mirsach Le, that as he was heating it up, as he took this kezayis of chalev and put it on the fire, solik amudo de nuro lepume demona v'korash, a pillar of fire rose from above, entered the pan, it contacted the fats, and it seems to me they got melted and congealed all at one time. And the isei kula gabi hadodi, it all remains together. It's an actual connection, and it's not a connection by virtue of a liquidy connection. So because of that unique situation, there is tuma. Now, let's take a look at the Rashi, a few lines down from here in the narrow lines. I can tell you that in general there is no liquid connection when you're dealing with food substances. There was no pouring action at all. There was no flowing, there was no movement, there was no shaking and movement from one part of the vessel to the other. The Rashi continues, it was in a pan, in one spot. It wasn't shaken around. There was the pillar of fire entered the pan and heated it up. There was no movement from one spot to another. The korash b'mkomo, and it congealed in its spot. Since there was no movement, no flow whatsoever, so even though momentarily it had become melted, but it then congealed without any movement. That is not what we're talking about. It's not a case of nitzuk. Nitzuk has to do with a flow, with liquidy movement. There was none of that over here, and therefore there still is tuma, even though in general I will tell you nitzuk eino chibur. Nitzuk is not a connection. Let's continue in the Gemara. Amalei Ravina leRavashi. Toshma beishamai oimrim af hamikbeh shel grisin v'shelpul v'tnei shehen soldin la'achorehen. Of course, a quote from our Tanaic source, the top line of this Amid. We take a look together at the Tosfos in order to appreciate this, bearing in mind that the question that Rami Bar Chama asked initially was not within Beis Shammai. What does the Gemara try to accomplish by quoting Beis Shammai? So we look at the Tosfos in the lower part of the page, the second of the widest lines. Tosh ma'af mikbeh shel grisim v'shel pul mipnei shein sod acharim alma taimo de shamai. The reason for the connection as far as Shammai is concerned, mishum riri. Hachi, because of the springback quality. Hachi nami mistabra taimo de tanakamo mishum riri. And it's most likely that that's also the Tanakama's reasoning. El Tanakama boy riri tuva. And it's just that the Tanakama requires an extreme type of springback quality, which in their eyes the porridge lacks. The tifshot, but with this in mind, let us conclude other foods that don't have riri at all, ein nitzuk. There is no connection. Let us continue in the Gemara. Midi irya. Is there necessarily proof from that which Beis Shammai says that the Tanakama also thinks along those lines? Hasa mishum desmichin, hacha mishum riri. The Tanakama, as far as we're concerned, might very well hold that in the Reisha, the Dvash Zifim Tzapichas connection was based on thickness, and because of that, so there is connection. The porridge has the springback quality, and for us, springback quality is not enough to create connection. We take a look at the Tosfos. Midi irya hasa mishum desmichi dvash shel zifim v'tzapichis davichibur l'rabonan. The honey connection that the Tanakama mentioned, hainu mishum desmichi v'lo mishum biri. It's because of their thickness and nothing to do with springback quality. Ubal pligi, and this is the very basis of the controversy. The Beis Shammai savri af ki lo smichi havichibur kivan the iko riri kilgon mikbeh shel grisim. Even if something lacks thickness, but it has this springback quality to it, Beis Shammai will tell you that creates connection. And according to the first opinion, the springback quality has no effect whatsoever. So at this point in the Gemara, the question would basically remain unresolved. In other words, you could analyze it this way, or you can analyze it that way. So that if you were to use the final statement of the Gemara, that the Tanakama is based on smichi, well, then other oichlim do have that quality, and it leaves room for suggesting that there would be chibur, according to the Tanakama, in the case of other food substances as well. V'al maloi tarvid rekev. Of course, a quote from the Mishnah. A malo tarvid, a spoonful of rekev, of corpse decomposition. Essentially, it's a case of the corpse having decomposed, and there is resultant, we'll say, dust or dirt coming from the body that has decomposed. If you have a malo tarvid is a type of spoon with a known quantity in the times of the Talmud. If you have a full tarvid of rekev, that would be an amount concerning which a Nazir would have to stop his Nazirus. He becomes defiled, and we say Nazir megaleh chalav. V'kamo shiro. The issue of our Gemara from here till the end of the Omid is introduced on the side with our noseh, our topic heading, Machloikes ma'u shiur shel lo tarvid rekev. So that's the question. What is the shiur? What is the quantity when we speak about this amount? In other words, even the Gemara is, we'll say, not sure, in the sense that we have a controversy. What is this spoon referred to? What is this quantity? So the Gemara asks, "V'kama shiro chizkiya omar malo pisas hayad." It's the amount that would fit into the palm of one's hand. We say palm without the fingers, so it's from the finger joint till the wrist, that area. And Rabbi Yochanan omar malo chafonov. Rabbi Yochanan says it's a much larger quantity, relatively speaking. It's a handsful, including the fingers. It's the amount that you could hold in two hands clasped together, filling the hands with the fingers. Tanan. Malo Tarvid Rekev Shamru. The Malo Tarvid Rekev that the Mishnah spoke about, Yeshnon Meikar Etzbois Ulamala. Divrei Rebbe Meir. There is contained therein from the base of the fingers till the tip. That's Rebbe Meir's approach. Malo Chafonov. So here we have two Tanaic opinions as far as what Malo Tarvid is. We had previously two Amoraic opinions. Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan hu the Omar Karabanan. Well, Rabbi Yochanan said Malo Chafonov. That is exactly what the Rabbanan say. So Rabbi Yochanan is on sure footing, being that he has a Tanaic authority upon whom to base his approach. Elo Chizkiah Kaman. Chizkiah spoke about Malo Pisas Yad, the amount that would fit into the palm of one's hand. Lo ke Rebbe Meir v'lo ke Rabbanan. He doesn't match the Rabbanan for sure, and he doesn't match Rebbe Meir either. Rebbe Meir spoke about from the base of the fingers where they join the hand till their tips, and the opinion of Chizkiah, who said Malo Pisas Hayad, doesn't seem to match that either. The Gemara answers two approaches. Number one, Amri, Malo Pisas Hayad, the palm full that Chizkiah spoke of, Umalo Kishrei Etzba'oisav Lamala Chad Shiura Hu. And the amount that Rabbi Meir spoke about, in effect, are equal quantities. In other words, the amount that you could put in the palm of your hand is the same as the amount that you would be able to fit into your fingers that are, I'll say, somewhat rounded in order to contain this corpse dust in it. So they're, in a sense, or in effect, they are equal quantities. So Malo Kishrei Etzbos of Lamalo and Malo Pisas Hayad equal one another. So there's no controversy, and there's another, or more accurately stated, Chizkiah has upon whom to base his opinion, namely Rebbe Meir. A second approach, Omar le Rav Simi bar Ado le Rav Papa, Mimai dahai mikishrei esboisav ulamala l'rosh, when explaining Malo Kishrei esboisav ulamala means from the finger joints to the fingertips, who says that that's what lamala means? Dilma lamata mididei dahave le Malo Pisas Hayad Mamish. Maybe the expression used by Rebbe Meir, who said Me'ikar etzboi sulamala, means from where the fingers join the hand till the wrist. Now, if you explain it thusly, so then Rabbi Meir is describing exactly what Chizkiah said. Let us take a look at the Tosfos at the bottom. Amar le Rav Simi, Shinuya hu, this is an answer. Mimai dahai mikishrei etzboisav lamala hainu l'roshe etzboisav, that it means the fingertips. The parchas mina, and then with that explanation we asked that he has no one to base himself on. Dilma lamata dekori ikar etzbos mokom shemechuboren lo layad. Maybe what Rabbi Meir said is actually at the connection, starting with the connection of the fingers to the hand, ulamala de ka'amar, and the term lamala that Rabbi Meir used didn't mean fingertips. Hainu litzad haguf ad perikas roa. It means upwards. If let's say you're holding your hand down, but by the side of your body, So from the finger joint to the hand, upwards means till your wrist. That's Perek Hazrua, where it joins then the arm. Dahainu mamish pisas yad. That is then exactly pisas yad. So it's not that Chizkiah and Rebbe Meir represent two different areas that happen to have equal quantity, but Chizkiah that says Malo pisas yad is simply described exactly by that which Rebbe Meir says. From the finger joint to the hand, upwards till the wrist. The area contained there within those boundaries is in fact the pisas yad exactly. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.
This was a presentation of the Daf Map. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to be informed of our other videos. For resources and more information, please visit our website at www.thedafmap.com.